Hello everyone. As you can see, I brought all the in-ear monitors into the office today so I could make this video when I had a few moments. Just to tell you what I got here, these are JBL Tune 130s. These are Moondrop Blessing 3s. These are Truth Ear Zero Reds. Those are the critical tuned ones. And those are my old pair of Shure SE215s. You'll notice that these both have Bluetooth adapters, and here's another Bluetooth adapter. This is a FiO BTR3K, I think. This is the one that has the 2.5 millimeter output on it as well, and of course these are Bluetooth headphones. So why did I bring all this stuff into the office today, and why am I making this video? One of the ways I keep my compulsion to acquire stuff under control is that I try to use the stuff I buy regularly and not buy stuff that I won't use regularly. This doesn't really apply to stuff like transistor radios or things like that, but when I buy new stuff and new radios, I tend to buy it with a purpose, with the idea that it's going to be used, or I tend not to. Admittedly, some of these uses can be pretty marginal. My iPod Hi-Fi gets a bit of a pass because I guess it's collectible and old now, but I keep it connected to the bedroom TV, which means it's in use, but I almost never use the bedroom TV, so there's that. But here we have 4-ear pairs of reasonably competent, some people would question that with these back to in-ear monitors, 3 pairs of which have been bought in the last 4 or 5 months. So, how am I going to use 4 pairs of in-ear monitors? Can't use them all at the same time, and I'm not really interested in collecting them. So I thought I'd talk a little bit about that today because I do actually have uses for all of these. They serve slightly different purposes. They have slightly different designs. They have different cost levels. And I think it might be a little helpful to other people who are similarly obsessed with using this sort of stuff, but it also might be helpful to people who are thinking about how a particular in-ear monitor might fit their use case. So hopefully that will be helpful. And I undoubtedly spend too much time thinking about this. So yeah, so there's my little obsession about that sort of thing in here as well. So I'm going to go through them one at a time. I'll tell you what they are and how I use them. And I'm going to go more or less in order of acquisition here. Slide my book apart, may cut that out, who knows. So these are the Shure SE215s. You can hear all about them. They're very warm. They don't have much top end, blah, blah, blah. But they've been around forever. Everybody knows what they sound like. Every drummer owns a pair, right? I'm not a drummer, but musicians tend to own a pair because they offer, up to about 30 dB of passive noise canceling, maybe even higher if you use the foam plugs on them. The sound is pleasant, if not exactly what audiophiles go for these days. These are on I bought these in 2016. These are on an old FiO made wired adapter that also comes from 2016 or 2017 called the RCBT, not made for a long time, although they do make a more recent version of it. So what are these? Well, what these are useful for me is that they are extremely small. You wouldn't guess it, but these just disappear in your ears, and they're comfortable as anything. They are by far the most comfortable thing here. Once you put them in, apart from the little wire hanging out, you can forget about them completely. And that makes them fantastic for use in bed. And I actually think that their very, we'll call it relaxed sound profile is also good for that purpose. So these have been, since I bought them, my before bed IEMs. I did have another pair that I used more out and about at that time. Those are gone. So I think they're fantastic for that purpose. I think if you are collecting, I think owning something from Shure is kind of important, and I think the 215s are obviously the most cost-effective way to go there. And if you put a very basic Bluetooth adapter on, it works fine. And I will say this Bluetooth adapter is from 2016, 17, 18, somewhere in there. Still holds a charge fine, still works perfectly. The sound quality is okay, definitely good enough for these guys. All right, so it's useful to have a pair of IEMs that are comfortable in bed, that if you fall asleep on, you're not going to really regret it. And I think the 215s are a good choice for that purpose. Anything that's small and has this kind of profile. I mean, imagine falling asleep on these, right? These are pretty chunky. Not comfortable for that. So these are the JBLs. These are a modern, fairly cheap JBL True Wireless. These are, as I said, fairly cheap one. The noise cancellation on them is okay, but not great. Microphone's pretty useful. Like most of, I think, the current JBL stuff, I haven't tried it all, but I have looked at some graphs. It's kind of Harman adjacent. One of the great things about JBL's app is that JBL provides a completely workable graphic equalizer. So these things are, I think, they're a bit weird in the top end, but they're okay, and I tend not to try to do much with the top end when I equalize IEMs or headphones. I'll maybe talk about that a little bit sometime in another video. But the bass is very elevated and it's a bit weird. And that you can fix surprisingly well with just a few small moves in the built-in equalizer. And the thing is, the equalizer's in the IEMs. It's not, in the phone. It's not on the phone app. So you disconnect from the phone and you connect them to something else. It still stays with the same equalizer settings. That's, by the way, true with this as well. That's fantastic, right? So there, the image is narrow. The resolution is, well, don't expect too much, right? The tuning is actually pretty pleasant once you make small changes in the equalization profile. They're not quite as V-shaped as some things, except for the ridiculous bass boost. And no, I think they're okay, but I paid $85 Canadian. I've seen them as low as $65 Canadian. I wouldn't pay any more than $85 Canadian for them. Actually, I think JBL's replaced these with a new model if they've simplified their product line. What do you need something like that for? Great for making phone calls, but I take the subway to my office every day, and these do a good job of knocking down the noise of the subway. They are convenient if the subway gets really crowded, if we go back to masking and whatnot on public transit. True Wireless is a lifesaver under those circumstances. And you can tap on one of them and turn on the outside mic so you can hear announcements. I mean, they're just good for walking around. They're good for use in, in that sort of transit scenario where you're moving around a lot. I think everybody should have some sort of True Wireless IEMs for that purpose. And they don't have to be great. Most people like the Samsung's best for that purpose. These were cheap. I wasn't convinced that I wouldn't lose one. I'm still not convinced that I won't lose one. But, these are fine and effectively disposable. And of course, the batteries are not going to last forever in these, right? Despite these things showing great lifespan, I don't know how these hold up. So that's what those are for. Those tend to live in my bag or my pocket and tend to get used for commuting. To the hardest case, these are the Truth Ear Zero Reds. Everybody's talked about those. You don't need me to tell you how they're tuned. These are connected with, I've talked about these before. These are, I'll hold it up so you can see, TRN BT20XS, which are just about the cheapest behind the ear Bluetooth adapter you can get. There's some oddities with that. I've had some weirdness when it's connected to the iPhone under certain circumstances. I'm not quite sure what's going on with that, but most of the time they sound pretty solid. My complaint about these is I think they're beautifully tuned, but I don't think they're terribly revealing. I don't think they're actually any more revealing than these are, like detailed, all that audiophile language. I mean, certainly not compared to these, which are very much so. These, well, first, what are we talking about here cost-wise? I did another brief video on this, but cost-wise, this package is about the same as this package. And these sound a lot better than that. And without equalization, these sound heaps better than that. And given that this includes the equalizer, that's cool. So that means that I'm willing to leave these in my desk drawer at the office. These are $400 or so Canadian. I'm not going to leave them in the desk drawer in my office. These I will. And with their charger. At the office, it's very useful to be able to not have wires. Wires are a pain in the butt when you're switching around from one desk to the other and, you know, doing whatever. These are great for that purpose. And I've had no issues with their connection to the computer. So, I don't know. If I ever figure out what's going on with those, I'll do a video about that. But as an office setup, these are perfect. The microphone in them is serviceable, but not great. But, you know, given that I have my own office, I tend to use the mic on my camera for calls anyway, so it's a non-issue. I think it's nice if you care a little bit about sound and have a reasonably secure storage in your office to have some headphones or IEMs that you can stash at the office. And these are filling that purpose at the moment. I used to use an old pair of Sennheiser HD 480s around here. Those date from like 1988 and are some of the first headphones I bought. But I prefer not to have wires. I generally like IEMs. I'm not, there are advantages and disadvantages to open backs in the office. So, yeah. So those fit that bill very well, and I think it's, for many people, probably useful to have something that's cheap enough that you can toss in your office drawer. So these are the Blessing 3s. I think they're great. They're probably not everybody's cup of tea, but they certainly are mine. I tend to use these as my primary IEMs at home. I don't tend to bring them out here. I brought them for the purpose of making this video today. I tend to use them with the iPad, usually just plugged directly in. These are not hard to drive at all. On the computer, I tend to use them with the BT 3K and often with it in Bluetooth mode, sometimes plugged in, depending on what I feel like. The mic in this is fine, and so you can use that for calls, or you can use the mic on the computer, depending on where you are and what you're doing. And I sometimes use them with the iPhone, that usually in Bluetooth mode. I've hardly ever plugged this in for that. So, you know, at home, good quality IEMs. Yeah, I have brought them out to the office, but don't typically. And obviously, if you're acquiring this kind of stuff, you're going to have a good pair that you use at home. So, what do we have? We have good use cases for 4 sets of IEMs. On the road, before bed, at the office, home. I think that situation probably applies for most people. If you don't tend to listen to stuff in bed, you don't have to worry about disturbing your partner, maybe you don't need these. If you drive to work, maybe you don't need these, but, you know, do you walk a dog? Do you take your kid out? I still think there's a pretty good argument for having a cheap pair of true wireless IEMs of some sort. Hopefully that's helpful to some of you guys. And you can think a little bit about the thinking about how you're going to use stuff. One thing that's also going to matter, under some scenarios is going to be how easy things are to drive. Everything here is dead simple to drive. You can drive this all with an Apple dongle, the output of your computer, whatever, doesn't matter. But if you have something that's harder to drive, if you've got headphones that are harder to drive, you then need to add amplification to your thinking about this sort of stuff. I don't own anything that this won't drive, but I might in the future, in which case that then limits how one's going to find a good use case for your equipment. All right, hope that was interesting. Thanks for watching.